For coming. So today's panel is to talk about the game of roles and which role in the product development cycle and product development process is kind of the most important. And so it's going to be a fun discussion. Obviously, everybody has different opinions about where their role is and how it fits into the process, and which one is the most important. And I think we'll hear from everybody their comments, and then we'll go through a bunch of questions about sort of product development and different things that might be on people's minds. And then I think at the end, if we have a little bit of time, we'll open up to a few questions as well. So I'll introduce folks here and just give you a quick introduction, and then everybody will kind of give their own real introduction, and a little bit of background of why they think their role is the king of the hill in the product development world. So we have Kit, who joins us. He's senior designer at, design director, I think, right? Is that the thing?
A lot of designy directory words, but I'm a senior creative director at Kyrylo, and I'm helping us build strong design culture and just do all of this stuff, collaborate with everyone in peace and harmony.
Awesome. And we have Tedi, who's at RepEquity.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I head our tech and engineering departments, and we do things from, I personally am involved in the technology side, but I help run a couple of our products, as well as our internal engineering culture and the way that we really run things and products.
Cool. And we have David, who is a multi-time entrepreneur and leads different companies, but he's putting on the product management or product owner hat. So.
Yeah, so I am involved in a couple different companies right now. The one that's occupying the most of my time is called Hitch, and we do credit card processing for a lot of the DC taxi cabs. But I originally moved to this area to do product management for Nextel. I was there through the merger with Sprint, but I've been doing my own thing for probably 7 years now, so happy to represent the product folks.
Awesome. And then we have Natalia, who is representing the QA folks.
Yeah, I work here at EastBanc Technologies, and majority of the time I manage projects here, and I'm responsible for quality of the products being developed.
Cool. So maybe we'll just kick it off, and what's your pitch for why the designers out of everybody rise to the top to be the most kind of critical piece to the product puzzle?
Gosh, they're not. Are we done here? Seriously,
make it entertaining.
I mean, yeah, it could be an entertaining kind of back and forth conversation, but I believe that whenever someone thinks that he or she is a king of the hill in this process, that is prone to a lot of conflicts and problems. It's crucial to just understand where everyone's coming from and just work together.
So what do you think are the key attributes a good designer brings to the table for a product team?
Our designers like to think of themselves as champions for humans and their lives, but then again, every other good digital product kind of developer says, no, I'm the champion for humans. You don't get humans, get the hell out of here. But designers bring knowledge to the table. They're like, okay, maybe you get humans too. We have actual tools and research methodologies to find out. And they're like, ooh, okay, all right, do your thing.
Well, maybe I'll turn to you, David. And how do you see the product role in the context of this forum? And how does that rise to the top in terms of this development cycle?
So I think it's very typical for Washington, D.C. for you to try and polarize people around like who's the most important, right?
Let's make it fun.
Yeah. So I couldn't agree more with your comment that it takes a team to do the job. And I can tell you when as a product manager, I think of the product manager as the hub of the wheel, the CEO of the product. And so when I am leading a product team, I look to design folks and QA folks and development teams to tap their expertise. right? So design folks, it's like, okay, as you stated, you've got your own methodology that the design folks bring, as well as knowing, current design practice, what works, what doesn't work, and to bring that to the product. And so I think the product manager's job is really to assemble the team in a cost-efficient manner, right? If you're starting a new product, it's about doing that, working towards MVP, working towards market fit in the least, spending the least amount of money that you can, right? Do I have a real product here? Is there any traction that we can get in the market? And how do I figure that out while spending the least amount of money?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what I think of the product manager's role is to tap resource teams that bring expertise, their own expertise to bear to figure out, I often I talk about product and MVP development as a chemist working in a laboratory. You run different experiments to figure out what's going to work. And when you figure out that you've got a repeatable experiment that will produce the effect you want, then you scale it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you build the factory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's kind of how I think about it all coming together.
Gotcha. Well, so I mean, you mentioned quality, making a product that works. So obviously QA has to be integral into the whole process.
Yeah, I got lots of thoughts about it. I'm gonna be a controversial.
All right.
Uh-oh.
Maybe I was a software developer early in my career, and I was thinking about KA as the way you test the product, right? But it turns out that we have two disciplines: quality assurance and quality control. And by quality assurance, it's actually a process that you have to follow to make sure that your processes, how you develop a product, are sufficient to produce product with the quality, intended quality. So you can think about that if you went from DevOps culture, it's like a Kanban. So you do your continuous improvement of the processes. That actually is quality assurance. If we're talking about quality control, is actual testing of a product. And I think about quality is like air. So you got your air, you breathe air, and it's everywhere, right? When we got problem, when air is polluted, we notice the problem with quality. And at that point, it actually is an indicator that our processes are suboptimal. So our ecosystem is out of balance. So you have to bring forces to restore the balance in your ecosystem. And by ecosystem, I believe it's the processes that we do inside the team, as well as relationships inside the team and outside. Because if you got bad quality product, your relationship with the clients and the users are deteriorating. So you have to restore balance in order to be on the market.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you have to have a quality product in order to please your client, your audience.
Can I ask a question for the QA? So
Sure.
my question is, and this question goes out to anyone in the whole room, really, and that is, at what point do you think QA comes into, let's say, an MVP development, a brand new product?
Mm-hmm.
At what point does QA get involved?
Mm-hmm. And by QA, you mean quality control, quality assurance, right?
Either or.
Oh, okay.
Or both.
I think quality control is the first one that jumps in the wagon, and when you kind of first MVP, whatever, like you have to be embarrassed, right, when you put it on the market. And I guess for embarrassing quality, you can do without actual QA engineer, right? Like developers can test, product manager can test, that's for sure. I think when the product is scaled, that's the more important to bring over quality control. And one of the ideas you might come up with is really testing the product, is making sure that your processes are efficient. And that comes in quality assurance. And what I've seen is not like a QA engineer thinking about that. I think it's more about thoughts coming from product management, that you need to make sure somebody has to care of the processes.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting, because when you think about MVP development as a product manager, you have to think about who do you bring in at what point in time, right? And I personally kind of think that designers are the most important in the very beginning of an MVP, right? I always say it's easier to make changes in paper than it is in code. So I think the designers come in first, and then I think developers, and then I think that your answer was right.
Just and there.
That you guys, when you scale, that's when you have to have the
Yeah.
QA
Yeah.
piece.
Well, I do think that there's always a reaction, maybe it's a knee-jerk reaction, where something at a scaled product that doesn't work, it's your fault, right? And so there is an argument that you're very important because otherwise you're going to displease lots of people. I think you raise a great point, which is maybe this king of the hill thing is really based on product stage or even type of product, right? Does the designer role differ in a different type of product? Or how about developers? How do they, if you're building an app versus a back-end service versus whatever, right?
Which role? So the question is, which role is more important depending on the product?
Or does the person who is kind of the product visionary or the luminary or whoever it is change based upon position of the product, MVP versus scale?
Yeah, I would say the biggest factor is really the dynamics of the team. Depending on what you have at first, we can get at first, who your founders are, what competencies are the founders are. I think that's how the importance of the role starts coming in. To say that one role is more important than the other, yes, you might not need QA in the very beginning, but if you don't ship a product, I know nothing is perfect when you ship, but if you ship something that doesn't work, then you're not going to get the users, you're going to have a bad reputation. But that's a role that might be filled by the designer, the developer, and the product manager in the beginning. So it really depends on the dynamics of the team. If you have a hybrid, as DC likes to call them, unicorns, right? Then those changes, those necessities vary.
Yeah.
The product, sure, you might be building a product that caters to developers versus to normal humans. There's always a design aspect to it. I call that not normal humans. There's always a design aspect into how people interact with the product, and I think you always need somebody to play design role and design champion. Same thing with the developer. If the product requires building and implementing, but the importance of what you hire is really, I think, team dependent.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to address what you said about resources. It's kind of all about team dynamics, and the dangerous route is when you start to think you're the CEO and you're in charge of measly resources who are set to deliver certain quality, right? We're all people, and especially at a small scale, good non-toxic relationships in a team are vastly more important than any combination of roadmaps and stuff like that, because shit is gonna fall apart no matter what, right? And it is important for people to just tag along. One of our product managers at Capital One, he's a really cool guy. His name is Michael Musoba. Some of you might have met him before his protocol. He likes to say or ask people, do you want to get there fast or do you want to get there together? Right? And I think that's what it is.
So how do you think, stuff has evolved over the last 10 years for sure, right? And even, 20 years ago.
Hold on, can I ask a follow-up question?
Very
Stir the pot, right?
Go for it.
Wants the pot to be stirred?
Sure, why not?
Okay, so you challenged a couple of things that I said, and I think that's fair. Let me ask you, do you think that, and I'll use the word resources again, because you spend money to bring resources onto a project. Do you think, depending on the phase of the project, certain resources are more important than other resources? And I mean QA, developers, designers, product managers. Or do you think that it needs to be fully staffed from the beginning and equally staffed forevermore?
But who decides at which stage your project is? You can measure the scale of your company, sure, just based on the number of people you have, just the seed round, or just purely the amount of money you got, right? But say you're building an MVP. It's a pretty arbitrary thing, right? You just draw a circle in the air and you say, that's MVP. And then, designer comes along. No, we must add a couple other features because otherwise the MVP is going to suck. And then developer comes along and says, you guys are nuts, okay? This is never going to work and we're not going to be able to do that within like 2 months. So, nah, not this feature, not that feature. And then the product manager comes along and says, well, we kind of need to deliver this feature for sure because we kind of promised those investor guys, it needs to happen. And so, therefore, the MVP is a combination of these kind of arbitrary factors. And then you have your roadmap and you say, well, according to this MVP, we're 30% along. So at this stage, according to my calculations, we should bring over QAs. Right? But if you redefine what your MVP is, all of a sudden you're at a different stage. All of a sudden you need maybe different people or no new people. You just get along with what you got.
So is that, yes, it should be the same team from the very beginning all the way?
I think
Or
it depends. Like,
It
yeah.
depends.
Safe answer.
Yeah.
Safe
It's
answer.
a really safe answer.
Yeah, I like to address because I know what I mean by defining arbitrary because it's like our mind, how we think, right? So you want to have that, and other people influence that and get a different picture. But coming from a project management discipline, I need to have a roadmap, right? So I think it's not something that we need to resolve at this point, but actually sometimes we put roadmap arbitrary because we need to get money from another round.
Well, and define stage. Is stage scale or is stage features?
Yeah.
Right? And in some cases, again, if you're scaling, right, then the answer I think is engineers, right? But if you're scaling for number of hits that your app, your product, whatever is going to get, then yeah, it's engineers. If you're scaling in terms of overall audience, then it's a hybrid, right? You need designers to think about all the nuances of all the different audiences coming. So, I'll stick to the safe answer. It depends. Just because stage is also something that's arbitrary, whether it's you got a certain funding and your new investors expect you to focus on something else, or whether you're all of a sudden getting all these users and your functionality might work for the time being. You just need to scale the number of users to support. It depends on that definition of stage, I think.
Yeah, I would say in my experience, team composition, it depends how many type of work you do. And sometimes you just adding to the same person different activities and roles. And at one point you just see that person cannot no longer handle that much. And that is an indicator they have to add another person with the staff that can contribute and offload the activities. And in my case, I always take all non-technical work from my developers to keep them focused. And I do project management and quality assurance, quality control, business analysis, and UX design.
Can I ask you a question? What if your developers want to do non-technical work? What if your developers want to be involved in design brainstorming, right? Then how do you inject them into the whole process?
Yeah, in my project, unfortunately, it's majority of them enterprise and B2B. And if you know the context and culture, you need to put a lot of effort to educate first why the designer, the actual designer. And what I've seen, sometimes we just do a little bit interaction design, and I bring over developer who's interested in interaction design. So he's improving that part when I'm contributing to make sure that we still understand needs and activities and tasks for users.
Then can I ask you a question on design and how you guys, and what you think is your opinion on how you guys might do it? The way that we design, there's certain times where we'll say that, okay, we have requirements very clearly defined, right? and the designer might go, quickly sketch something, come back to the development team. But there's times when designer and developers sit down and we actually sketch things together in the room with a product manager. And I personally think that's invaluable when you have all the teams involved in low fidelity. Then designers can clean it up, and you can based on best practices that they have experience with, they go and fine tune things. But I feel like for most of the products I've been involved in, the best work we've done is when we've sat in the room and we've all kind of walked through the flow, walked through the general idea of how things work. Now, there's a fine line between having developers be in every meeting and bogging them down in meetings and design feedback, but I think there's a good balance, a good zen between that and having everyone sit in the room for the important conversations to at least kick things off before the designers can then, take it a step further.
Yeah, sure. Who else looks extremely great in that room, along with everyone else? The users, the customers. I think the most amazing experience that we had, we were designing digital and service design experience for Capital One branches. And so we brought iPads to Capital One branches and lots of cool technology, lots of cool shit. We're like, okay, so we need to take so many factors into equation. This is such a complex undertaking. So how do we do that? So we took the entire team of developers and the product managers and the product owners and the QAs and the Scrum Masters and the designers and went straight into a branch. We cleared up the space. We set up kind of a mobile office. And we were sitting right there and asking people who were just walking around for a week. It was insanely great. I think the best experience I had. But yeah, to your point, everyone is a designer these days. This motto kind of has been circulating around on the internet, right? A designer who feels like, no, you're not gonna take away my craft from me. You gotta ask my permission to sketch a rectangle on a piece of paper. That's a bit insane. I think designers' duty this day and age is to just infuse everything with human-centric kind of thinking and stuff like that, and share as much knowledge as possible. Frankly, if everyone in the room is able to produce great design solutions and great, features and ideas, then at that point, designer's job is done.
Yeah, I actually would like to clarify because I'm from software development world. I've never got a actual designer, anytime in my team, and when I was developer, we never got designer, and when I was managing the teams, we never got designer. And my impression was that designers are an artist. They do visual design. You're laughing, but actually I just discovered 3 years ago that is not the case. Because I was so in the culture of developing. So we never designed products, we were developing products, right? And developers are busy developing. And I was fortunate enough to look around and see and discover the design actually a process. And it's so liberating. So if we can talk and say everybody that design is not actual art, it's the process, the same as project management process. And I believe in agile environment, we can employ business analysts to be the first people who understand how the design process works, to be at the beginning of the design cycle. And then they can educate project managers and developers what is the actual design.
Yeah, I think this is great, and I wish people like you would be telling designers every day, almost like a little slap on the face. No, you're not a fucking artist, dude. No, that's not how it works.
Here's my roadmap. So you have to finish your ideation.
But who does the artwork then?
Well, frankly, in digital development, no one does. It's not about art or making things pretty at all. Problem is, well, first of all, a lot of people have those kind of old misconceptions about what designer is, right? When I became a designer, and I started telling my friends and family I'm a designer, their first reaction, like 20 years ago, was like, so you do furniture? 10 years ago, so you design dresses? 5 years ago or 7 years ago, so you make logos? Right? That kind of deal. And designers come out of colleges, and not all the colleges for designers have a decent program, right?
Yeah.
They spend 5 years actually learning how to make logos, or what's the difference between serif and sans serif.
Yeah.
And then they come into real work environment and people start asking questions like, what's your velocity, right? Or like, we're doing agile, go meet your scrum master. And I'm like, holy shit, what are you? So yeah.
Well, that segues into kind of an interesting topic. I mean, obviously, everything's changed with like Agile, and like 10 years ago, there wasn't mobile really, right? So you're designing for a new platform. Like what other things do you think have kind of changed in that time that for good or bad?
I remember the time when Keough, for example, started doing Agile. It was such an intense process. There were hordes of developers everywhere with like battle chants. We're doing Agile, right? It was like a cult of Agile back then. But so people started doing a lot of ceremonies for the sake of ceremonies, right? And kind of lost touch with what it's all about, really. I think what changed over the past 4 years everywhere in product design and development is this understanding that it's not about craft-specific processes. There are no design processes, there are no product processes, and no development processes. Well, maybe a little bit of development processes, but it's all shared. It is crucial to share how you do your work with your partners. Like, it is absolutely essential for designers to have developers and product partners look at designs and kind of co-design together. I think it is absolutely crucial for product managers to involve designers and developers in the process of developing a roadmap.
I guess the one thing I'm hearing consistently is communication. It sounds trite, but like obviously the more you can communicate with anybody, any stakeholders in the process, from users, right, up to your board member or whomever it might be. And I don't think everybody has the luxury of, we're going to go to the branch and talk to people, especially if you're starting a brand new, mobile app or what have you.
Plus, one thing that has changed through the years that's become more accessible by startups, not just enterprises, is just methods of measuring data, right? You no longer need to have a big fancy lab where you're recording eye tracking and recording every action the user is taking. You can actually pretty quickly test a concept, build a prototype, get feedback, and talk to whatever difficult stakeholder might be saying with just raw data.
Yeah.
And SurveyMonkey has a cool tool where they used to be just focused on building surveys. Now they've got another kind of side business where they provide people to take the surveys, right? To go one step further.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about kind of where things are now. Let's talk a little bit about where things are going. One of the things you hear is, there's new tools all the time coming out in every one of these roles, right? That are automating things or changing things or applying new processes. And I think, maybe let's start with, there's like low code tools, right? So now I'm merging perhaps who might be a designer with a developer because I can use this tool, like Appian just went public, and that's their mantra, right?
Mm-hmm.
Low code or no code.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that change the future of, the product development process from a developer's perspective? And obviously there's pitfalls there, I would imagine.
I think he's just waiting for us to give credit to Sympli for
maybe, I don't know. We'll find out.
I mean, I'll start by saying that, again, the basics of building a good product are good team dynamics and a team that talks often and is transparent and tries to remove challenges from everybody as opposed to adding barriers. Like, for example, developers in IT in the past were looked at as the people that always gave constraints and gave challenges, right? I think removing challenges is one of the biggest goals through communication, to build a good product. So some of the exciting things that are happening are tools that help the communication. Things like Zeppelin, which allow designers to give more explicit feedback to developers how they should implement designs. Tools like, there's tons of wireframing tools where developers can go in and give feedback and designers can change it real time, and then we can get the feedback from users real time. So the tool set is really evolving, and it's really exciting kind of seeing those things. People think as tools as kind of adding separation, but these things have been really making the whole process a lot easier to communicate, making expectations easier to set. And then of course from the development side, there's tons of nice things coming along, which really have been available to the big companies for decades, but things like continuous integration, yes, to the lowly startup that has one developer, one designer, one product manager that wasn't accessible 10 years ago, but the Microsofts of the world have always kind of, at least for the web, been doing this. When it came to software they install, it's a bit different. So the tool set for communication has really evolved the past few years, and I'm looking forward to kind of getting that collaboration between designers, product managers, and really feedback with the users to be kind of even more tightly knit than it is now. I have opinions about tools like having software that spit out code for you. I think that is getting better, at least on the visual side. On the business rules, I think we're a pretty long way from having machines that code complex machines. We can get machines to spin up machines quite easily, but there's quite a bit to be done there. So I think in the near future, the tools that are really going to keep improving are the ones that really facilitate collaboration between product designers, features, issues, user feedback, and so on.
So here's the shameless plug. So one of the processes we see a lot, right, at Sympli, is because we're connecting designers, developers, and team members, is designers don't have some of the same tools that are available to developers, right? Like they're not using Git repositories, and they're not familiar with the metaphors of checking in, checking out, and that kind of thing. And that's a tool that we've actually started building. It's called versions, where it's essentially Git for designs. But what are your thoughts on, as you introduce more tools into the design world, how does that impact the design world?
I want to take a brief moment of silence, for all of those horrible, horrible days and weeks and months where designers and developers are essentially fighting over incompatible tools, right? I think 9 out of 10 times designers and developers are mad at each other is because of that, is because tools suck. A lot of new stuff is great, right? Sympli is great, Craft, Envision, Zeppelin are all really good. But what I think the future is kind of starts looking like, it feels like there are going to be 2 different career paths for designers. One kind of designer is the kind of designer who keeps Googling, should designers code? I kind of know, I really want to kind of find out. So that's perfectly fine. You don't have to be a developer. You could learn a little bit of code and you can start adopting those tools that bridge the gap and be like really immersed into production, right? Developers, I think, are taking the same kind of route, just the other direction. And in the end, I think we're going to see a shared group of people who use similar tools and do similar kind of work. The other kind of designer that emerges out of it is a designer that kind of detaches from tools altogether. Back to a conversation of like making beautiful things and artwork, right? If you truly believe that's not what you do anymore and anyone can produce solutions, it is much faster to tell developer in words or through Zeppelin how to make things beautiful than to actually sketch them in pixel perfect whatever, right? And then you arrive to a point where your tools are notepads and Google Docs and stuff like that. A really good example of those kind of designers are service designers. Service designers do not require any digital capabilities altogether, right? That's a perfect kind of designer who does not actually need developer buddies. They're like, oh, we're gonna totally do it all by ourselves, maybe with the help of product manager. And a very similar kind of trend that emerges is everything that has to deal with AI, right? AI designers and conversation designers that we've been hiring super actively lately, they're building language trees and kind of natural language platforms and that kind of stuff. There is no artwork whatsoever, right? So even if you come out of that old school college, you're like, where do I put this little Helvetica caption or something? You just can't, because it's not applicable anymore. And that trains designers, I think, in a completely new mindset that we only gonna see manifest. I think this is designers merging with product managers on that side of the aisle.
So I think AI is a great one. I'll toss it to you, David. As you have tools that can start to learn from the.
I think it's her turn.
Well, I got one for her too. As you have tools that can start to learn from all the amounts of data that you're collecting. I know Capital One is an enormous user of data to figure things out. Doesn't some of the business analytics and business analyst role could potentially become machine identifying features, identifying capabilities, identifying what your user is clamoring for? I mean, theoretically.
What do you think?
Not in near future, but actually what I think we can use artificial intelligence for is unstructured data, for testing. I know we have several platforms in the market that's called robotic automation and process platforms. And what they do, you can use them to do your business process modeling inside, and then the robot will execute the process on your environment, like throughout your application, maybe several applications on once. And actually that reduces the role of business analysts, because business analysts now can do business process in this platform, and the platform will continuously do testing, structured data, right? When you have unstructured data inside of that jumping around an application, we can use artificial intelligence. And I know some of the platforms now already have the modules that integrate that.
Yeah.
I think just tools in general are exactly that. They're tools, right? So it's repetitive things that computers do well, or accelerating tasks that we can all do, but a tool will help us do it faster, whether it's Balsamiq or some sort of reporting analytics package or whatever. I'm a big fan of all that stuff. I think tools will speed you towards prototyping, right? So if you want to build something quick and you can't afford great dev team, or you can't afford the best designers, or you can afford only so many of a designer, they can pull something together with Balsamiq pretty quick, and a developer using a tool could get a rough prototype out the door. It's not going to be pretty, but it's got some fields and it'll process data, and it kind of speeds the prototyping process quite well. So I think all those things are wonderful things.
Cool.
And the new products, right? Like I actually seen a couple of days ago a robot, like a chatbot on Facebook Messenger that offers session with psychotherapists. But psychotherapist is a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people paying for that.
And one other thing on this topic, as a product manager or as a CEO of a company, which I've been a couple times, I rely on subject matter experts to know the tools that exist in their world, right? So if there's some sort of testing tool, I would want my test lead to tell me about it, to save money, so we can build that into our company's process, right? If there's some sort of design tool out there that's going to allow rapid prototyping, or allow the dev team and the design team to work in a more collaborative fashion, I want that person to integrate that into our company. So I think these tools are something that individual kind of experts need to be aware of, and I think that's some of the value that they bring is to bring the tools that make sense to the company's culture and processes and things like that.
Yeah.
We work work quite a lot on that and bringing different tools into the process and so many different levels. If you kind of take a 10,000 feet view and look at all of that stuff being integrated into all the processes continuously, I think there are two kinds of that stuff. There are subject matter experts who come to the development from a point of craft. They're like, I am the craftsperson, I'm the owner of knowledge here, and I'm telling you the supreme authority that this is the tool to go because it helps me bring my expertise better, right? And then there's a whole other type of tools that help people be together, help people solve problems together and understand each other better. And I feel like those tools are winning. And I feel like I would choose integrating Slack over any other tool every day of the week, right? And things like that. Every time a designer comes in and says, hey, I found this new fancy schmancy thing I want to implement, the first question is, so what do you want to accomplish with that, right? And so when someone came over and said, I want to get this like super cool typography like fonts library, right? Like, okay, those are beautiful fonts and you definitely know the difference between serifs and sans serifs. But did you ask your developers how they feel about having like 1,000 fonts in the app? Like, shit. Well, I know better. I'm a designer. Not so much. So yeah.
Not totally.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the big takeaways here is obviously collaboration and communication and tools that can help support that, or, just meetings or structure and processes are going to help the team succeed, right? And the team as a whole is really the king of the hill, right? Not an individual. I think that's the long and short of what came out of this.
Yeah. I think these tools emerging, again, like you said, tools are just tools, right? So at the end of the day, it's all for communication, but I think they're emblematic of what we're talking about, the culture of building products and building good products together. And I think the takeaway there is together is the main keyword, right? So, the problems of building stuff for me were solved long ago. That's why in the development world, an example is Vim. We have all these fancy IDEs out there. IDEs are development environments that give you hints, give you help, and these have been around for, again, decades. But then there's Vim, which is super simple. Think of it like the Notepad on steroids, of course. But people are now becoming super passionate about that. So those problems have been solved for a very long time, and I saw some head shaking there. There's a lot of developer debates about which tool, but again, it's personal preference. The personal tools issue was solved a long time ago, so I think the future is really like, how do we make it together better, more seamless?
Mm-hmm.
I have a super important question to ask. Spaces or tabs?
I saw the article, and my gut reaction would be spaces, but spaces and tabs.
The best of both.
Lots of spaces, lots of tabs. Again, a tool, but
so personal preference.
Personal preference.
So we have a few minutes left.
To go back to your earlier question, it depends.
It depends. That's a great answer for everything, right? We have a few minutes left, and maybe we'll throw it open to the floor if there are any questions from the crowd for anybody in particular. Jeez. Yes?
It's more of an observation. I'm really encouraged by the focus on collaboration and communication, because I recently had a conversation with someone where they were considering a candidate and they didn't want to move forward because the person was too focused on communication. It was for a product manager position. Instead of, they wanted them to be able to quote SWLC, agile and whatever. And it's like, those are things you can learn, right? You can buy a book and learn about these things and how to implement, or you can learn them on the job. But the ability to be able to sort of speak to people where they are and create understanding is a skill that, it's rare, right? So I just kind of shook my head like, okay, and so I was a little bit blown away. So this is You have restored my faith.
I've seen actually a
Amen.
couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn an article that were kind of instructions for HR department how they can remove biases. And by biases in interview, they actually mean first impressions. And unfortunately for them, it was a bad thing to notice that a person is able to communicate clearly, because they need more of a hard proof of the competency. And unfortunately, there's a balance. How do you make sure that the person able to learn new things, not only talk,
Right.
and give empathy.
Yes.
To that point, one of the surprising things I learned in a computer science class in grad school was the #1 reason for failure of big software development projects was communication problems.
I think that's universal for
Yeah.
pretty much any project, really.
Yeah. to even take like a more, 100,000 foot overview is, every project, every relationship is expectations, right? Set expectations with your stakeholders, their users, and meet those expectations. It's when expectations don't get met, either internally or externally, is when you have either failure or a success.
I think emotional touch is very important.
Yeah.
Because some people just get frustrated because maybe they got expectation that people actually haven't noticed before, and at this moment it's really good to have some training. How do you deal with emotions? Not be scared of it, but
Yes.
Hi, thank you to all you guys, I really appreciate it. And to kind of piggyback on one in front of me, as a PhD candidate in organizational development psychology, basically being a business psychologist, I find it interesting to hear about what's valuable to the employees that you have working with you. And I too both think that the intangibles outweigh the tangibles. I have organizations I work with that use assessments for their developers and designers. So I'm heavily involved in tech space and the design space and work with creative vectors. And I understand the quantitative value of it. But I also understand the anxiety that comes with tests and things like that. And I'm just curious, maybe from you guys, and it's not to put anyone on the spot, like where do you draw the line in deciding like when do these assessments make sense and then when do they not make sense?
I can take that. That happens to be my everyday work, creating career path and psychological kind of profiles and models for all of our designers and developers to coexist. And I think it comes from you, right? I really underestimated the importance of being this kind of person who designs those systems, because you infuse whatever you create with your own values, right? If you want to create a cut and dry, super business-centric environment which dissolves people into resources and puts labels on everyone's foreheads, that's what you're gonna get. But if you create your system flexible enough and people-centric enough so that you don't have to take an assessment. Whatever you take an assessment is a conversation starter, not the label maker, right? You might want to validate or confirm your career path or your kind of psychological model with your manager, with your peers, other people. Then it becomes much more democratic. And then another cool thing, so right now I'm heavily kind of invested into the Gallup Strength Finder and kind of building the next level model around that. It really helps kind of turning it around. What Gallup did is they created leadership themes. That whole thing was made for executives to command and conquer, right, and rule their domain. What if you turn that around and instead of using it as a framework to rule people, you make it a framework for people to connect with each other, find matches with each other, not be a valuable resource to a manager. All of a sudden people are happy and like taking that assessment and are jumping to give me results. These are my strengths. I'm like, great.
Thank you.
I think it's important. hard skills are important as are soft skills, right? It's just, that's true, right? You need somebody to write the code and communicate in meetings, right? You need both. I think my problem with some of these big corporate entities that end up with these assessments is you kind of sometimes strip out some diversity, right? So, you know, you might label someone as not being a team player, but maybe that person's going to bring a really critical perspective to the team that is kind of stripped out because they didn't pass some test that was designed to only allow, you know, certain types of people in. So I think the tests, and I have no problem with tests in general, but I think that they need to be very carefully designed. You need to know what you're learning by them. You need to know who you're ruling out, you know, when they're implemented. So I think it can be useful, but it can also be dangerous. I recently interviewed at Amazon, and I was really taken aback by their very well-designed HR interview process. And I walked out of that full day of interviews feeling like they didn't get to know me because of the questions that were asked of me. And it's a very well-designed process, but it's just not designed to achieve good objectives in my mind. Like, you can tell somebody really thought it through because everybody was doing exactly the process. And I found it really odd because a couple days after my interview, I read Jeff Bezos' annual letter, and he talks about this concept of moving from day 0 to day 1. And day 1 is kind of bureaucracy, where the process takes over. And I was like, oh my gosh, like...
He's moving fast, right?
Yeah, like,
It's in your backyard.
like, you should think about the interview process because every single interviewer asked the same, in my mind, kind of silly questions that really didn't reveal who I was. And so I think you just need to be really careful about kind of mass implementation of policies or tests or things like that.
Yeah. My experience with the assessments at organizations that I've interacted with previously or worked with clients and whatnot is that generally the vision of like, we're going to learn so much out of this and it's going to make us much more operationally efficient or insert whatever objective is here. It's so disconnected from that after it goes through the machinations of like building this assessment that it gets disconnected, and now we're doing this assessment because we do this assessment, not because it's driving any real value.
Yeah, the process takes over.
Yeah, and so I think that's where it ends up more often than not in my experience, but it sounds like, you know, if you look at it in a more creative ways of like how do you spin it around to really accomplish the objective. It's just I worry when you start to institute things like that, when does it build its own, you know, thing? It becomes this process, and that's just what we do. So
I have a quick story to tell. Just it's something I'm super passionate about. Just who people are, the psychology, right, the mindsets of people. Because I think we all kind of transgressed from tools and hard skills over into first the combination of hard and soft skills, and I think it's moving further and further along into people, right? Just people and their human qualities and stuff like that, which are vastly more important than tools and hard skills, because you can learn those, and robots can do those, and what's left is just us and our personalities. And so here's the story. I did not hear that quote about, you know, you can get there fast or get there together for many years. I was the get there fast kind of guy. I'm like super cruel and ruthless, right? And I would like beat the shit out of my developers and like, we gotta get this right, come on, go team, and like stuff like that. And for years I kind of lost human touch, right? Because I was so passionate to get there fast, to push it into the market and blah, 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 blah. And then when I started figuring out this whole personality thing and this journey, someone pointed out I was wearing all the red stuff, right? So he probably saw me like way back, and like I had red t-shirts and like red everything, right? And it just worked. I didn't even think about it. And then, you know, like, hey, I want to make this mental experiment. What if I'm going to start wearing all green, right? Yeah, it sounds silly, but what if?
My wife told that he kind of laid down the person right now in comparison to what he was before, so it's a kind of date night.
Or red and green.
It's the only thing.
Let me add. Are you done with your? It's a wonderful story. I agree. Let me add another dimension to that. Say you have all these assessments, and you build these drones that do things exactly how you want perfectly. What happens when 6 months from now, 2 months from now, a year, 2 years from now, the whole marketplace changes and your business has to change holistically, right? You have to, the word that we all love, pivot. God, that hurts. Like all of a sudden, those processes and those people that you so carefully vetted for their jobs are good at their jobs. They're no longer relevant to what you need to do, to you going in another direction. So it's also very important to think, what happens when you bring people of certain characteristics defined by, certain questions and certain matrices. At the end of the day, you want people that, meet your values, and I think you have to set early on what your company values are and what's important to you in terms of people, and then hire people who, certainly have specialties, and for specialties there's tons of interview questions and assessments you can do, but I think what's most important is people that would be willing to change if your company was to change and follow you. So slow to hire based on those characteristics, I think has worked pretty well for at least companies I've been working with the past few years.
Well, that's another good point, is the whole slow to hire, right? So one of the odd questions that they asked me at the Amazon interview was, how do you hire? And I said, well, I like to bring somebody on as a contractor and get to know them slowly, or maybe work with them at night, or because I don't really, it's very hard to get to know somebody in an interview environment, right? I've heard interviews described as two people sitting across the table lying to each other for an hour. Like, it's just ridiculous, So, I think for those of us in the startup world, slow to hire is a great tool, right? You work with somebody slowly but surely, and you get to know them, and you kind of get to see what they work like. I think it's a great way.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are looking to get into the startup world, it's another great way to kind of
Feel things out.
Yeah.
Yeah, people change and companies change. So.
I wanted to ask you just one last thing to follow up on the emotional intelligence, right?
Oh, that's right. A bit of insurance.
It's a passionate thing for me. Tell me how you think about it. What emotional intelligence means for you, and why is it important?
Yeah, it's there is actual structure that Harvard describing to managers. So I really glad that it's no longer we hide in the closet, and because I'm working with guys, and guys breathe in certain ways to not express their emotions, but emotional intelligence is to know your emotions in discussion and to label them, name your emotions. So you have to be aware how your anger in your body, how you joy, anxiety. So basically you name that during discussion, and then when you see your partner expressing some nonverbal cues, you can name emotions. What do you think the person is experiencing? And then you can adjust your tone of voice or message in order to slow down and maybe work on this emotion without even naming it. And I think it's great way in certain conditions. When I remember my product manager was actually freaking out because production just fell. And I knew at that point, no talk about technology would work, right? So I have to slow down and just listen to him and give reassurance. And then so after an hour of that discussion, we came up with a plan how to tackle the issue. And this way of working with clients actually is very beneficial for business. But unfortunately, we don't teach managers to do that kind of stuff and get time to understand how do you work with emotions.
Did she nail your interview question?
I mean, yeah, I
Crushed it.
Don't go EastBanc.
What is your definition?
of emotional intelligence. I can't really say because I have an EQ of 4. So
Out of what?
out of 70, I think.
70.
4 out of 70. So that's pretty low. So I kind of suck.
Is this like golf though? You need to get a low score?
Unfortunately not. I get what it means, and I'm trying to learn to read those nonverbal cues. I'm like notoriously bad.
Yeah,
at
you
that
know what?
stuff.
It actually takes lots of years and maybe even radiography for yourself first. So once you understand your first, you can understand other humans.
I started reading Brene Brown, so that's a good start.
That took you from 3 to 4.
It's 2 to 4. You got it.
2 to 4.
All right. Any other questions, or I guess we're already over time, aren't we?
The questions were great.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think everybody can hang around and chat. Or
Thank you.